charity gala, my husband decided it was the perfect night to embarrass me. He put a ridiculous item up for auction. Dinner with my boring wife. Starting bid, $1. But then, someone unexpected rose from the back row. Jasmine had felt a strange heaviness all day, a quiet warning she couldn't shake. It wasn't from the elegant midnight blue gown she wore, but from something deeper, the silent weight of 7 long years cracking beneath her feet. The feeling of emptiness, of being unseen, had followed her like a shadow she could never outrun. The dress had been Sterling's choice, not because it suited her, but because it made him stand out. She was meant to be the dark, quiet backdrop to his shining presence. And tonight's charity auction, the annual display of wealth hosted by his company, Vess, felt less like a celebration and more like a stage where she played the role he assigned her. From her table, Jasmine watched him glide through the room, laughing too loudly, shaking hands, giving out empty compliments. To everyone else, he was charming, polished, successful. To her, he was a mask, one that only cracked behind closed doors. "He's an illusion," a voice whispered inside her, "and you helped him build it." Every triumph he flaunted tonight carried her fingerprints. She was the one who spent sleepless nights polishing reports, building financial models, crafting the strategies he proudly presented as his own. The spotlight was his, the work had always been hers. She never complained. For years, love, or what she thought was love, had been enough. Or maybe it had been fear of losing herself, fear of being nothing outside his shadow. Her father's old words echoed in her memory. "The world forgets talent. It remembers performance. Be wise. Let others shine." So she had dimmed her own light and let Sterling shine, until the day that light inside her flickered dangerously low. The ballroom buzzed with laughter, music, and wealth on display, but Jasmine felt only the loneliness of the past 7 years. Years spent silencing her own voice, her dreams, even her anger. She thought of the small backyard office she had once dreamed of turning into her writing space, a place where she could finally begin her book, The Silent Architecture of the Market. But Sterling had laughed. "A book, Jazz? Don't be silly. You're the engine behind my work. Who else is going to make the numbers dance? You're my quiet Jasmine, my boring Jasmine." No shame, no hesitation, just entitlement. He turned her dream into a flashy bar for his business partners, a place that smelled of expensive scotch and self-importance. The only person who ever noticed her quiet heartbreak was her elderly neighbor, Ms. Lois Jones, a kind, earthy woman whose garden faced their yard. Ms. Jones was the one who offered Jasmine a warm mug of chamomile tea and the honesty she didn't know she needed. And tonight, as Sterling prepared to auction off dinner with my boring wife, Jasmine realized something important. The pact she had lived by, the silence, the sacrifice, the fear, was ending. Someone had just stood up from the back row, and nothing in her life would be the same again. The tea tasted of real earth and homegrown herbs, nothing like the polished, artificial world Sterling lived in. "You can't revive withered flowers," Ms. Jones had told her quietly, "but you can remove them, so new ones can grow. Life is like my rose garden. It doesn't accept love that has gone still. It needs care, or a clean cut." She lifted her warm eyes to Jasmine. "Sterling is a nettle, dear. He takes your light and your space. Cut him out before he overgrows everything." Then she chuckled softly. "I once kept a cactus in a tiny pot. It never bloomed because I wouldn't give it room to grow. Sterling is doing the same to you." Those simple, earthy words had carved themselves into Jasmine's heart, and now they echoed louder than ever. That was the exact moment Sterling walked toward her table. His face glowed with the kind of confidence that comes from never being questioned. His cologne, rich and sharp, drifted ahead of him like a warning. "Everything is going perfectly, my Jazz," he said proudly. "Our division brought in the highest donations." He leaned in, but his eyes were already scanning the room, making sure others were watching him admire his own success. "That's good," Jasmine murmured, forcing her lips into a curve that wasn't a smile. "And," he continued, puffing up with pride. "I came up with something spectacular for the auction. A surprise." Her stomach tightened. Sterling's surprises always came with a cost, and she always paid it. The auctioneer announced the main lots: fine wines, luxury vacations, rare art. Sterling raised his paddle again and again, showing off his generosity, soaking in every approving glance. Then he made his move. He stepped onto the stage and smoothly took the microphone, positioning himself right where the spotlight erased every flaw. His crisp white shirt looked like polished armor. The room fell into an attentive hush. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling began, his voice ringing with confidence, "I have a very special item to offer. Not material, but definitely exciting for anyone seeking a unique experience." He paused, letting the silence marinate around him, roaming the crowd for admiration. Jasmine felt the chill creep up her spine. This was it. The final blow. The moment he would make her small in front of everyone. "Lot number 27, Sterling announced dramatically, lifting his hand and pointing straight at her table. Jasmine didn't look up. "Dinner with my very boring wife." His tone was sharp, theatrical, almost triumphant. For a split second, the room froze. Then laughter exploded like a breaking dam. Sterling grinned, drinking it in, chest lifted as though he had delivered the line of the century. He tilted his head slightly, waiting for more applause. Jasmine felt her face flush with heat, then drain into icy numbness. Boring wife. 2 words that hit harder than any insult he had ever thrown in private. She felt every stare land on her, heavy, invasive, cutting. Women who once envied her now watched with thin smiles, satisfied. Men smirked at Sterling's joke, quietly judging his taste. Even the executives at the front tables smiled politely. No one saw a problem. No one cared that a person had just been reduced to a punchline. Sterling extended the humiliation. "Starting bid, gentlemen, $1, he called cheerfully. "Only one. Surely someone wants a night with the woman who makes all my reports look so brilliant." More laughter. The air thickened, unbearably warm. Jasmine's eyes stung, but she refused to let a single tear fall. Her throat tightened painfully, her pulse pounding like a frantic drum. Her hands trembled beneath the table. She curled them into fists, nails digging into her palms. She didn't feel the sting, just the rising wave of cold, precise fury. This was worse than the sleepless nights, worse than the credit he stole, worse than every quiet dismissal. This was a public execution of her dignity, and something inside her, something she had buried for years, finally snapped free. He has to fall, she thought with absolute clarity. He has to feel what I feel right now. This was no longer about divorce. This was her justice. Something inside Jasmine snapped, not a delicate thread, but a thick, rusted cable that had held her to this man and this life for far too long. "5!" someone shouted. "10!" another voice chimed in. The mocking chorus rose again. Jasmine looked at Sterling. He met her eyes with absolute satisfaction, not a trace of regret, only triumph. In that moment, she finally saw the truth. She had never been a partner. She had been a backdrop, a convenient tool, a punchline he used to elevate himself. Then, all at once, the laughter died. The room froze. A dense electric silence settled over the crowd. From the exclusive back rows where only the most influential guests sat, a tall man rose to his feet. His presence alone shifted the entire atmosphere. He wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that absorbed the light and declared authority. His posture was almost regal, his expression sharp, assessing, cool. It was Dr. Silas Thorne, a legend in business circles, a man known as the architect, someone who could identify talent, redirect careers, and reshape entire companies. No one had expected him here, and no one was prepared for what came next. 100,000. His voice boomed like thunder through the stunned silence. $100,000. The number hit the crowd like a shockwave, crushing the laughter that had filled the room only seconds before. Sterling stood frozen on stage. His smug smile vanished. His mouth hung open, the microphone limp in his hand. Dr. Thorne stepped forward, slow, deliberate, down the long aisle. Every move radiated purpose and absolute confidence. The air around him seemed to crackle. He reached Jasmine's table, lowered his hand, and offered it to her. "Pardon me, Mrs. Vance," he said, his deep voice steady. "Dr. Thorne." Jasmine looked up. There was no pity in his eyes, no amusement, only recognition and a quiet, unwavering respect, as if he could see her entire unseen life, her buried brilliance, and her true worth. She placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was steady, grounding. When she rose, Jasmine felt every pair of eyes on her, but instead of shrinking, she stood taller. The cold fury inside her crystallized into something sharp, clean, and powerful. She wasn't an auction item. She wasn't a shadow. She wasn't a boring wife. Her value had just risen from $1 to 100,000. "Such talent should never be wasted," Dr. Thorne said, turning deliberately toward Sterling, who still stood rigid on stage. "My bid is not for a dinner. It is for the expertise and integrity this gentleman has just attempted to sell for $1. The room absorbed his words in complete silence. Jasmine understood their full weight. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a reckoning. Weeks earlier, at the lowest point of her despair, she had gathered every report, every model, every analysis she had ever created for Sterling, even the ones he had dismissed as too complicated. She sent them all to Dr. Thorne, a last-ditch cry for justice, a message in a bottle. She never expected a reply, but he had answered, and now he stood before her like a force of nature, pulling her out of the humiliation she'd endured for years. Dr. Thorne gently guided her toward the exit. The crowd remained frozen, unsure what to do. Sterling didn't move. He simply stared, stunned, pale, breathless, as Jasmine walked away, a ghost of the life he had destroyed, a ghost now holding the evidence of his downfall. "We'll speak tomorrow morning," Dr. Thorne said as they left the ballroom. "Your resignation is already prepared. You only need to sign it." Then he added with quiet assurance, "An opportunity awaits you, Mrs. Vance, a life where you are not someone's shadow but the architect of your own success." Jasmine couldn't speak. She only nodded. A weight, heavy as stone, slid off her shoulders. Her dress, once suffocating, now felt light as silk. Leaving the ballroom wasn't simply an exit. It was liberation. Outside, the autumn wind swept against her skin, cool and fresh. The stale scent of money and vanity vanished from her lungs. The night smelled of rain, of freedom, of a new beginning. She got into Dr. Thorne's car. The interior smelled of leather and quiet order. She didn't look back. At dawn, she didn't sleep. She packed her clothes, her books, the notes that documented the hidden chaos behind Sterling's polished facade, the notes that held the key to his coming downfall. Sterling slept peacefully, unaware, a grown man in a careless, childlike slumber, unaware that the night before had been the end of everything he controlled and the beginning of everything she was meant to become. The pre-dawn gray crept into the bedroom, laying a soft, cold light across Sterling's sleeping face. Jasmine studied him for the last time, not with longing, not with grief, not even with anger, only with clarity. This was the face of a man who had used her for years, draining her brilliance while feeding his ego. The faint crease near his mouth, a line she once mistook for strength, now looked like what it truly was, the mark of someone who mistook arrogance for power, someone who believed he could twist life to his will. Her rage had cooled into something sharper. Resolve. She took out a sheet of paper, wrote her resignation in a few precise lines, and placed it on the living room table. Next to it, she left a personal note, a single sentence borrowed from Ms. Jones. "I cut the nettle to make room for new growth in the garden. The rent for my sacrifice is now due, Sterling." She did not wait for him to wake. She did not need to witness his shock. She walked out quietly, closing the door on the house that had been her cage. Outside, dawn greeted her with the metallic scent of damp asphalt and the exhilarating promise of a new beginning. When Jasmine arrived at a small, elegant cafe in Midtown Manhattan, Dr. Thorne was already waiting. His expression held a hint of warmth, but mostly focus, the look of someone who valued integrity, talent, and results over empty charm. His cologne was crisp, citrus and bergamot. Fresh, clean, honest. Sterling's had always been heavy, sweet, and suffocating. The difference struck her like a metaphor she could finally breathe in. "Have you made your decision, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, handing her the menu. "I resigned," she said simply. The words felt like a verdict, not on her, but on the life she had just abandoned. For the first time in years, her voice sounded like her own. Clear, even, steady. "Excellent." Dr. Thorne nodded, studying the determination in her eyes. He wasn't evaluating only her skills, he was evaluating her rebirth. "You've caught fire, Mrs. Vance. That is powerful motivation. I've already spoken to the leadership at Crestwood Capital Group. They are very interested in your experience and your unique insights." He leaned in. "The position is senior lead analyst. You'll head a brand new division we'll build around your vision. Full authority, full resources, a salary 3 times what you earned before, plus performance bonuses, and of course, full recognition?" His tone softened ever so slightly. "Never again a boring wife. Never again a $1 bid." There was no sarcasm in his voice, only respect. Something cracked inside Jasmine, but this time it wasn't pain. It was the ice melting. For the first time in years, she felt valued, not as someone's supporting cast, but as a leading force. "I accept," she said, her voice carrying a steel she had not heard in herself before. This wasn't just acceptance. It was a declaration, a claim to a life she deserved. Revenge would simply be the natural side effect of her rise. "Wonderful," Dr. Thorne said, taking a sip of coffee. "You can begin immediately. Your office is ready. And one more thing." A knowing spark flashed in his eyes. Crestwood is preparing to challenge Vanguard Equity Solutions for 2 major agricultural clients, Golden Harvest Farms and Heartland AgriCorp. Your former colleagues won't let go easily. Your insight will be extremely valuable. Jasmine's lips curved into a smile, cool, sharp, controlled. She knew everything about those clients, their needs, their frustrations, their broken promises. She had built the proposals. Sterling had simply changed the adjectives and read them aloud. His career had been constructed on her architecture, and she now held the blueprints. Her first days at Crestwood Capital Group were like stepping into cold, clear ocean water after years trapped in a stale room. Her new office was minimalist elegance, glass walls, polished wood, and a sweeping view of the harbor where ships rested like symbols of vast, unexplored horizons. No lingering traces of Sterling, no ego, no suffocating sweetness of his cologne, just her work, her voice, her brilliance. Dr. Thorne became not only her advocate but also her mentor. He sharpened her vision instead of dulling it. "You have a gift, Mrs. Vance," he told her during a meeting where she dissected a complex financial risk structure with breathtaking precision. "You don't just analyze numbers, you see the people behind them and the errors born from arrogance and complacency. Use that insight." His gaze met hers. "Think of it not as revenge, but as strategic justice. You are reclaiming what was taken from you." Jasmine nodded slowly. For the first time in her life, those words felt true. Retribution through excellence. This idea became Jasmine's new internal code. She remembered everything, every unmet request from clients, every complaint about bureaucracy at Vanguard Equity Solutions, every opportunity ignored because Sterling didn't want to disturb his comfortable routine. The agricultural holdings weren't just looking for financial services. They wanted a partner who understood their seasonal cycles, their modernization plans, their specific needs for machinery and fertilizers, and their long-term strategies. Sterling had dismissed rural business as too complicated. Jasmine saw a gold mine. "I have a few ideas, Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice steady and cold with confidence. VES is rigid. They offer standard solutions when Golden Harvest Farms and Heartland AgriCorp need a tailored approach, flexible credit frameworks, and, most importantly, innovative investment strategies. We can give them everything they've been asking for, but never received. She leaned forward. We won't just offer financial services. We'll design a full development strategy, optimization, growth, and expansion, a plan that takes them to the next level. A perfect hook for the audience followed. If you're enjoying Jasmine's story so far, tap the like button. It helps me know you're listening. And don't forget to subscribe to Betty's stories for more. Now, let's continue. Her transformation is only beginning. The next morning, Jasmine's first destination was the HR department at Vanguard Equity Solutions. Mrs. Vance, do you need something? The HR director, Ms. Renee Jackson, blinked in surprise, clutching a lavender stress ball, the usual coping mechanism for anyone working near Sterling's division. I'm submitting my resignation, Jasmine said calmly, handing over the folded paper. There was no hesitation, only certainty. Ms. Jackson scanned the letter, her eyes widening. But why? You're one of our most valuable employees. And Mr. Vance, he depends on you. The quarterly report is due. We can't function without you. Her concern was for the company, not for Sterling, and Jasmine noticed. I ask that the formalities be completed as quickly as possible, Jasmine said firmly. I don't require a transition period. The resignation is by mutual agreement. Her clarity left no space for persuasion. Ms. Jackson exhaled and nodded. All right, but Mr. Vance will be very upset. That was an understatement. Jasmine walked away without answering. She felt as if invisible chains had shattered around her wrists. She was free. Sterling woke late, head aching with a vague feeling of unease. The room was too bright, too quiet. No scent of Jasmine's citrus perfume, no fresh coffee, only the stale remnants of last night. He smelled failure before he understood it. He went to the kitchen, empty. A sealed envelope waited on the table. He opened it, expecting a note of apology, maybe a soft complaint. Instead, he found a resignation and a single, emotionless line. No emotions, no explanations, no accusations, just departure. For a man who lived off attention, that silence was the sharpest accusation possible. What the hell? He muttered. His voice echoed strangely in the empty apartment. Is she seriously upset about some harmless joke? He tried to rewrite the previous night in his mind, but the alcohol blurred the details. Only fragments returned, boring wife, the echo of laughter, the spotlight, the stage. He felt irritation, not remorse. He reached for his phone. Jasmine's number was unavailable. His irritation turned to anger. How dare she disappear now during the most important week of his career? Then the truth struck him with brutal clarity. The quarterly report, unfinished. The projections, incomplete. The analysis, incomprehensible to him. All of it lived in Jasmine's mind, in her careful notes, in her talent. And for the first time in years, he realized the truth. He had depended on her far more than he had ever admitted to himself. Panic clawed at his chest, a cold, suffocating wave. When he reached the office, Sterling raced to his computer. He opened file after file. VS CO3, 2025 Q Report. Risk Assessment, Draft 4, Client Strategy, GHF. Many were password protected. Others were half-developed models he couldn't decipher. Spreadsheets filled with variables, projections, and interlinked formulas stared back at him like a foreign language. Without Jasmine's explanations, it was all meaningless, a forest of numbers, a maze with no exit. Panic tightened in his throat like a vice. For the first time in his career, maybe in his life, Sterling Vance was truly afraid. Sterling felt as though he were wandering through a dark, unfamiliar forest, one where every wrong step could send him tumbling into an abyss. Except the compass, the map, and the flashlight had all been in the hands of the very woman he had driven away without a second thought. The office, once the scent of his triumph, now smelled like paper, dust, and impending collapse. "Miss Jackson, has Mrs. Vance really left?" His voice trembled despite his effort to sound casual. Cold sweat rolled down his back. "Yes, Mr. Vance," the HR director replied without emotion. "The resignation is finalized. She will not be returning. She waived her notice period by mutual agreement." She closed her folder and turned away. To her, he was just another demanding manager who had lost the best asset his department had. "But why? Because of yesterday? It was just a joke. The report—" His voice cracked, sliding into panic. "Mr. Vance," she said sharply, "that is not within my jurisdiction. I've completed the paperwork." And just like that, the last door quietly shut behind him. Sterling drifted back to his office like a man sleepwalking. He sat at his desk and tried to piece together the scattered data Jasmine had once handled with such ease. But nothing worked. Nothing made sense. His talent had always been performance, presenting ideas, selling polished results. But without Jasmine's work beneath the surface, he was nothing but a speaker without a script. He clicked through folders. VSQ3 2025 report, final. Risk model V7 client analysis, GHFJV, password protected, encrypted, unfinished, unreadable. What Jasmine had built was a living system. To him, it was a foreign language. His heart hammered wildly. His hands shook so badly he nearly knocked over the expensive designer lamp on his desk. The ground was falling out from beneath him. His division, the one he had flaunted for years, looked now like a fragile house of cards collapsing under the slightest breeze, and he was the weakest card in the deck. Meanwhile, across the city, sunlight streamed across Jasmine's new desk at Crestwood Capital Group. She calmly finalized the last slides of a presentation that dismantled, with surgical precision, every mistake Sterling had made over the past few years. She had turned whispers of client frustration into practical, lucrative solutions. It wasn't joy she felt, it was calm, the calm of a surgeon removing a rotten tooth. And within days, the results arrived. After a series of meetings led by Jasmine and the CCG team, Vanguard Equity Solutions' two biggest clients, Golden Harvest Farms and Heartland AgriCorp, formally announced their departure. It wasn't just a loss. It was a public flight, a calculated escape from incompetence. Contracts worth millions were gone. Reputation? Shattered. Industry chatter exploded. Crestwood Capital Group was suddenly the rising power. VES was suddenly the firm losing its grip. And Sterling Vance? He became the name whispered behind closed doors. The man who auctioned off his department's brain for $1. Chaos erupted inside VS. Forecasts fell apart. Contracts stalled. Investors panicked. Sterling, unable to finish the quarterly report, raced through the building like a storm. His once impeccable appearance had dissolved. Hollow cheeks, wrinkled shirt, trembling fingers. "Can't anyone see the problem?" he shouted, voice cracking. "We're losing control. Where is the data? Why can't someone explain why we lost these clients?" His employees exchanged confused, helpless glances. Without Jasmine, everything she built felt amputated. Her absence was a hole no one could fill. The news of the lost clients was the final blow. The walls seemed to close around him. He couldn't breathe. He had to steady himself against the doorframe to avoid collapsing. Then the call came. Mr. Theodore Harrison, CEO of Vanguard Equity Solutions, a man not known for second chances. His voice was cold as steel. "Mr. Vance, my office now, and spare me the excuses. I want facts, not one of your stories." Sterling's legs felt like water as he walked toward the elevator. He had built a career on Jasmine's brilliance, and now that she was gone, he was walking straight into the meeting that would dismantle everything. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if Sterling were sinking into quicksand. He pushed open the door to Mr. Harrison's office. The CEO sat behind his desk like a judge delivering a sentence. His expression was carved from stone, his eyes sharp with disappointment and rising fury. On the desk lay an ominous folder bearing the Crestwood Capital Group logo, a mark of defeat. Beside it were contracts from Golden Harvest Farms and Heartland Agricorp, but stamped with Crestwood's name. The air smelled of cold coffee and bitter failure. "Mr. Vance," Mr. Harrison began, his voice deep and thunderous, "what exactly is happening here?" He leaned forward. "We have lost 2 of our largest clients. 2. That represents losses in the tens of millions, losses you caused, and the damage to our reputation is beyond calculation. Partners are questioning our competence. Trust is crumbling. Tell me, Mr. Vance, how do you explain this, and spare me the empty lines?" His gaze pierced straight through Sterling. Sterling stammered something about unfair competition, market instability, Crestwood undercutting prices, but Mr. Harrison slammed his fist onto the table, making the coffee cup rattle violently. "Enough, Mr. Vance. Don't insult my intelligence." He shoved the folder across the desk. It slid towards Sterling like a snake ready to strike. "Look at this," Harrison said. "This is the strategy report you presented to our former clients. This isn't dumping. This isn't market pressure. This is exceptional work. Work so detailed and so advanced that you clearly didn't write it." Sterling opened the folder. His blood ran cold. Charts, forecasts, analytical frameworks, even the phrasing, those uniquely sharp, elegant turns of language he had heard from Jasmine for years. It was unmistakable. The report was hers. Her brilliance, her precision, her mind, weaponized, against him. That's not possible," he whispered, his throat tightening. "It is not only possible," Harrison replied, his voice trembling with restrained anger. "It is a fact. You lost a key employee, someone who, as it turns out, did every meaningful piece of work for you. Your celebrated reports, your presentations, your strategic victories, all hers." He leaned in, eyes blazing. "And now she works for our competitors, using her knowledge to dismantle everything you built on her back." Sterling felt the room tilt. "You destroyed your own division," Harrison continued. "You placed the entire company at risk. With her talent, Mrs. Vance could have earned millions for us. With you, we are bleeding." He straightened his suit jacket. "You publicly humiliated the only person holding your department together. You didn't just lose an employee. You lost the company's mind." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The cost of your so-called joke was the collapse of your career." Sterling opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. No argument, no excuse. His world had already shattered. "I've made my decision," Mr. Harrison said, voice cold as marble. "You are terminated for repeated incompetence, for losing a key specialist, and for causing severe damage to the company's reputation. Your replacement has already been arranged. You have 1 hour to clear your office. Your system access is being revoked." He glanced down at the papers. "And, Mr. Vance, you will not receive a reference. As far as this industry and this city are concerned, your career is over." Sterling walked out of the office in a daze. Every step felt like dragging chains. Colleagues who once flattered him now avoided his eyes, whispering behind their hands. Their expressions carried silent judgment, even a hint of satisfaction. No one wants to look at a man who was on top yesterday and shattered today. The successful department head, the pride of the division, the man who believed he was untouchable, now reduced to nothing. One careless decision, one cruel joke, had cost him everything. When Sterling returned to the empty apartment, the silence pressed against him like a weight. A burning ache spread across his chest. He hadn't only lost his job, his status, his money. He had lost Jasmine, the foundation of his life, the mind behind his success, the person he thought would never walk away. And now she was gone. The woman who had made him successful, the invisible mind behind every one of his victories, was gone. Loneliness had settled into his home like an unwelcome tenant. The apartment, once warmed by Jasmine's quiet presence, now smelled of stale air and abandonment. It felt as though the very walls judged him. Sterling wandered from room to room. He opened her closet. The dresses were gone. An empty stretch of rail stared back at him like a wound. He hadn't just been left. He had been erased. He stepped outside into the backyard. The wet bar he had built, his monument to ego, stood cold and unused. Its surface gleamed with frost, indifferent to him. The cold seeped into his bones. Across the fence, Miss Lois Jones was pruning her roses. She lifted her head. Their eyes met. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She simply looked at him. A long, heavy look full of sorrow and disappointment, the kind a judge gives after silently observing years of decay. The look nearly choked him. He fled back into the house. Inside, the silence pressed against him like a vice. The quiet he once found comforting now screamed of his failure, of everything he had destroyed. He dialed Jasmine's number again and again, but all he heard was the indifferent voice of the machine. The subscriber is currently unavailable. Again. 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 She had burned every bridge. He left voicemails, pleading, apologizing, but the words felt empty even to him. Too late. Far too late. He tried calling mutual friends, people he once considered his social circle. Few answered. Those who did sounded awkward, distant. "Sterling, you understand, it's complicated. You really messed up," one muttered, and Sterling heard not sympathy but thinly disguised satisfaction. "Sorry, can't talk right now, busy," another said before hanging up. He wasn't successful Sterling anymore. He was just Sterling, a man no one wanted to stand next to. His reputation was ruined, his image trampled, he had betrayed his company, and humiliated his wife. Now, he was paying the price. He sank into the couch of the empty apartment, surrounded by a silence louder than screams. Scenes from the gala replayed in his mind, the laughter, his smug grin, Jasmine's devastated face, Dr. Thorne rising, her hand in another man's, her icy, resolute eyes. He remembered her working late nights, her patience explaining complex systems to him, her faith in him, her loyalty. And then he remembered how he repaid her with humiliation, disregard, and a joke that destroyed everything. On the coffee table, where she used to place fresh flowers to bring warmth into their home, lay a note he hadn't noticed that morning, a note written in Jasmine's hand. "I wish you exactly the same happiness you gave me. Think about it." In the silence, those words struck like a final verdict. He had no one, nothing, and only emptiness ahead. He had built the fire that now consumed him. He alone had crafted his downfall. Sterling Vance, once the rising star, now had nothing, not even hope. And this was only the beginning of his suffering, a cold, merciless lesson about the true value of respect and love. 2 months later, autumn had hardened into a crisp, quiet winter. Jasmine sat in her new office at CCG, glass walls, clean lines, polished wood. Her team admired her. Her success was undeniable. The name Vance no longer belonged to Sterling's legacy. It belonged to hers. Her modest apartment was simple, peaceful, her sanctuary. Clean furniture, a balcony overlooking a small park. No velvet, no gold, no suffocating expectations, only freedom. One Saturday afternoon, she drove back to her old house, not for sentiment, but to retrieve the last boxes of her books from the garage. As she parked by the curb, she saw Miss Lois Jones in her yard, surrounded by winter roses and fallen leaves. Jasmine no longer felt anger, only a quiet, intellectual sadness for the years she had lost. She approached the fence. "Miss Jones." The old woman straightened slowly. Her sharp eyes recognized Jasmine instantly. No surprise, only deep, quiet satisfaction. "Ah, Jasmine," she said. "I knew you'd come back. I've been waiting." Miss Jones waved Jasmine into the yard. The air carried the scent of damp earth and the quiet promise of spring returning. "I'm just picking up some books," Jasmine said softly. "But I wanted to see you. And thank you. Your words were the cut." Miss Jones smiled, a smile that deepened the soft lines around her eyes. "Every garden needs a winter, Jasmine. A time when the cold strengthens the roots for the next bloom. Your winter has passed. She pointed toward the backyard with her weathered hand. You see, a rose that isn't pruned grows wild and wastes its energy on the wrong things. Sterling was that rose. Too much show, not enough substance. And you freed yourself. Now you're planting new roots. Jasmine followed her gaze to the wet bar, once Sterling's shrine of ego, now cold, hollow, lifeless. Yes, Jasmine said quietly, he lost everything. That's the law of the garden, Miss Jones replied gently. You harvest what you sow. He cultivated loneliness, so he reaps loneliness. But you? You cleared the soil. You made space for something true. Her eyes softened as she looked deeper into Jasmine's. How are you really, Jasmine? Not the architect, the woman. For the first time in months, tears filled Jasmine's eyes, not from pain, but from relief. I'm alone, she whispered, but I'm not lonely. I have work that's mine. I've found my own worth. I'm building a foundation that's stable. That is rebirth, Miss Jones said, placing a firm, warm hand on her arm. Remember this, young lady. The greatest happiness is being your own gardener. Tend your new roots. Revenge was only the weeding. Life is the bloom that follows. Don't fear the cold earth. It is the cradle of life. Jasmine nodded. She understood now. Freedom wasn't the absence of Sterling. Freedom was the discovery of her own strength. With a deep, genuine smile, she thanked the old gardener and walked toward the house. The wind was cold, but it cleansed instead of piercing. She felt lighter, stronger. She was the architect. She was the gardener. Her new life was only beginning. 3 years later, the woman once known as Jasmine Vance stood on the stage of the annual financial congress as Dr. Jasmine Reed, the architect of a new financial philosophy. She no longer wore heavy velvet chosen for her. Instead, she wore a gray pantsuit that radiated quiet authority. She spoke not about numbers, but about the architecture of sustainable success, a system she had pioneered at Crestwood Capital Group. Her voice was clear, her presence commanding, her legacy undeniable. When the applause finally faded, Dr. Thorne approached her. Brilliant work, Jazz. We're proud of you. This is the real victory. Superiority, not destruction. The destruction handled itself, Jasmine answered softly. I simply rearranged the pieces. She had heard what became of Sterling. He had never recovered after his dismissal. He worked odd consulting jobs for small firms, buried in debt, relying on the last fragments of contacts who no longer answered his calls. He learned, slowly and painfully, that illusion collapses without substance. His loneliness deepened until he found himself returning to the wet bar in his old yard, the only place that still felt familiar. It no longer smelled of scotch, only damp wood and despair. And then came Jasmine's final act. With her new salary, more than triple what she once earned, she bought back the house Sterling had been forced to sell, not to live in it, but to gift it to Miss Lois Jones. When she arrived at the house one last time, Miss Jones was already waiting at the fence, as if she had known all along. I heard you're the new owner, Miss Jones said with a warm smile. A beautiful gesture, Jasmine. It's not a gift, Jasmine replied. It's a foundation, a home for new talent. I'm tearing down the wet bar and building a small library there, a place where young people can study in peace. Right where Sterling celebrated his ignorance, Miss Jones murmured. And the garden? She asked. The garden is yours, Jasmine said. My gratitude, and a symbol of rebirth. Teach them here that life requires care, not vanity. Miss Jones's eyes glistened with tears. That, Jasmine, is the most beautiful justice, turning what was taken into something good. Life is the greatest teacher of all. Jasmine drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as the old gardener stood among her roses, ready to nurture new roots. Jasmine inhaled deeply. The wind of winter felt warm. She was no longer the boring wife. She was Dr. Jasmine Reed, the architect of her own life and the gardener of her own soul. That was her priceless triumph. She had arrived. Final message to the audience. You know. Looking back now, I understand something important. Sometimes life doesn't break you to destroy you. It breaks you open, so you can finally see who you truly are. For years, I thought love meant silence and sacrifice. That strength meant holding everything together, even when it hurt. But real strength isn't about enduring pain. It's about having the courage to say enough. It's choosing to walk away from anything that dims your light, even when your heart trembles. Losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because in that loss, I found myself. I learned that peace isn't something others grant you. It's something you build inside, step by step, with every boundary you set and every dream you protect. So if you're listening right now and feel trapped, remember, your story isn't over. You can begin again. You can rebuild from ashes. You can rise stronger. I'm living proof of that. If you connected with my story, please show it with a like. It helps me see how many of us are out there. And I'd really love to know, from which city and at what time are you listening? Write it in the comments. If you'd like to support my journey, you can send a small donation. It truly helps. Thank you for sharing your time with me. For more life stories, check out the videos on my channel and make sure to subscribe. On your screen now, you'll find 2 stories I'm sure will touch your heart. Click one and start listening right away. With love, Betty.